Okay, yes, welcome to Germany, everybody. Welcome to Unna in Westphalia in Germany, where our Ahnenforscher Stammtisch Unna is located. My name is George, and we are a meeting point for genealogists from near and far since 2001, and since April 2020, we are an international meeting point. And yeah, we are hosting this connection sessions. This is the third online Pommern connection session in cooperation with the Pommerscher Greif and the International German Genealogy Partnership. And this is our agenda for today. And I would like to give you some general information about this meeting, and then I want to give Nancy Myers the word, but let me explain give you some more information. Nancy, maybe you can talk a little bit about the virtual conference of the IGGP.
Oh, yeah, sure. As you probably know, possibly the International German Genealogy Partnership has had um, a really nice conference every 2 years, and it was supposed to be in Cincinnati this coming summer, but due to the restrictions of COVID, we're doing that completely virtual now. And it does have some advantages in that you can visit and participate from your home. You don't have the travel costs, and we're hoping that we'll have a wide geographic area represented there, both in terms of speakers and attendees. What I'll do in just a second is put the link to the blog that has all the information about the conference. There is an early bird discount in effect right now for registration, and it does end on March 31st. So I'll put the link in the chat and encourage you to take a peek. And if it looks like something that might be of interest to you, now is a good time to sign up for it before the early bird discount expires.
Okay, I go further. So these are our home pages from the Pommerscher Greif, from our Ahnenforscher Stammtisch here in Unna, and from the IGGP. We will put the links into the chat. If you are interested to visit our home pages, please feel free to do this. Yeah, and some explanations. We muted the microphones, but if you want to ask, comment, or share information, please, you can unmute your microphone, and maybe Klaus will later tell you if he would like to have questions during his presentation, or later he will tell you. So you can unmute and unmute your microphone here with this button, with the microphone button, and feel free to turn your camera on if you like. That's would be wonderful to see you all here. We are 125 here, and I want to say hello to Australia too. It's early in the morning in Australia, very early. So good morning to Australia too. And please open the participants list if you have space on your screen to see who is here with us today. Um, and open the chat. That's very important to open the chat. So there will be maybe a lot of links in it. And oops, okay. And from time to time, please save the chat. On the bottom frame of the chat window, you will find a little square with 3 dots in it. Please click on the 3 dots, and yeah, you can share. You can save the chat. Please do it from time to time, because if you will be kicked out by technical problems and you come back into our meeting, the chat will be lost for you. So then please, from time to time, save the chat on your PC. And what's important too, you question, comments, and connections directly via microphone, or you can type your questions in the chat, and feel free to type in where you're from, the family names maybe, the names of the village where your ancestor came from, to find connection to other participants. And fill the chat, please, with questions, comments, and share information and links to help others. That would be a nice opportunity to do it today. And then when you have a question, a comment, you can raise your hand. Maybe not everybody has this hand, this yellow hand in the Zoom bar below on your screen. If not, then in the participants list, in the lower frame of the participants list, you will find another option to raise your hand. And I see Steve, he raised his hand right now. Maybe you tried it out. So that would be good if you are using these three possibilities for question and comments and connections. So I will stop my screen sharing and I will give the word to Nancy, because she will explain the information, the pin board to you. So Nancy, maybe you can share your screen. I
Sure,
want to,
thanks.
yeah, moment. Okay, now you can share your
Yep,
screen.
okay, just a sec. Can make it a little bit zoomed in so you can see the pins. If you're looking in an area, you can click on any pin and oops, just got small again. You can click on a pin and see somebody has typed in the village their family came from and their email address. So if you find you've got people, other persons here whose family came from the same area, you have a way to make contact with the other participants here today. And it's important then that you would, consider pinning your families too. And you can do that by clicking on this big plus over here in the corner. When you click on that, you can start to type the village name or the town name that your family came from. And you'll probably need to use the current name of the village. So I'm typing in Common where I live and I see it on the list here. So I'll just click it and the pin is there. And I could put, we live here now. And then I just put I could put my name if I wanted. And the important thing is an email address so that others can contact me if they have family or research in this area. I type it in. I could upload a picture if I wanted to do that. I don't have to do it. I can just hit enter, or actually I don't even have to hit enter. I just click outside of my pinned box and it's already saved there for me. So that's how that works, and I'll put the link in the chat again so that you can use that. The other question that we had was if there's a handout, and we're using a Padlet for that as well. And this is what the Q&A Padlet looks like. I'll put the chat for that as well, or put the link in the chat for that as well. And let Susan in. There we go. I've got a Marie in also. Sorry about that. To use the Padlet, what you're going to want to do is scroll from left to right, and you'll see all the questions that have been submitted in advance of today's session. So scroll left to right to see the questions. And when you, or the topics even, some of them that's not really a question, but a topic. And if you want to see the answers, then you need to scroll up and down in whatever column, you're interested in. So that's how that works. If you yourself want to add a question, scroll all the way to the right. And here it says in German, add a column. You can click it and add your question and then hit save at the end. If you know an answer, want to add something to one of these columns, click the little plus up at the top and go ahead and just type in your answer or your comment. So that's how that works. And I'll put the link for that as well in the chat. Okay, I'll turn that
So
back over to you then, Georg.
yeah, it's a growing pin board. It grows while we're doing this session. That's a wonderful thing, and you can print it out or you can save it as a PDF, I think, by yourself. And so feel free to use the link. Nancy will put the link into the chat for this Padlet. And I want to call Dr. Klaus Kort in the wonderful village of Kosel near Eckernförde in northern Germany. Klaus, are you ready to share your screen and to start your presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Georg.
Let's go.
And Nancy for preparing this and hosting this session. And welcome to everybody attending tonight. I hope I have put together something of interest to you. This is the third session on Pomerania that we're having since late 2020. And in the first session, we felt there was a need to learn a little bit more about Pomeranian history. So that is the focus of this evening's session. But before I get started, for those that have attended the earlier sessions, I want to make a remark that you should take note of. We've recently found out that some of the references that we have shown and are showing in our databases to locations for digitized records, online records, have changed. The Polish archives are redesigning their internet presence, and the individual pages of independent archives are being integrated into an overall Polish archive portal. The link is given here. This was initially detected with the archive from Czechia, and this web address still exists, but it doesn't get you to the records that you want to find. This may also happen with other archives in the near future. We haven't got a schedule, and we will be updating our databases to reflect the changes as quickly as possible. But it's quite a bit of links that we need to update. So if you can't find something, go to this portal archive and look for the location, the village, or the parish that you are researching, and you will find the records there. Okay. Just to get you started, a well-known picture of Pomerania in the early 20th century. And most of you are familiar with that, but it didn't always look like that, the boundaries of Pomerania. So that is what we will be talking about tonight. 1,000 years of changes in the appearance of what was called Pomerania. The primary source I will be using for this presentation is an online encyclopedia about Germany, and one of the chapters deals with Pomerania. It's only available in German, but with Google Translate or any other translator, you should be able to follow what's in there. And it's definitely recommended because it gives you a nice summary of the last 1,000 years of history in Pomerania on a fairly high level. And again, this tonight is not going to be straight from the history book, but it's a history through the eyes of a mathematician, to focus on the big picture. I've added a few text slides primarily for the handout, so you don't need to read all this. This is just already translated from the source that I quoted and gives you an introductory summary on 2 pages. So, starting around the year 1000, the dark shaded area here was the settlement areas of the Pommerns, a Slavic tribe that represents the origin of Pomerania. The name Pommerns came from the West Slavic word "pomore," meaning land by the sea. Because this here is the Baltic Sea, and in contrast to the land by the sea, the central area of Poland was a different tribe. Also, to get your bearings, you probably recognize the island of Rügen in the west and the peninsula of Hel or Hela in the east. Here we have the river Oder, and here we have the river Weichsel. So this is the area that we're dealing with. And in the following slides, you will have the same shape with different markings. So it's almost like a little film if you want to run just the pictures. All of these are from this article that I quoted, and they have been published in a book, just to make sure that I give proper credit to the authors of the diagrams and the texts. This is a slightly different picture giving other Slavic tribes in the area of what's today more or less Poland, the Pomeranians or Pomorans by the sea, and many other tribes all the way down to Hungary, Slovenia, etc. These Pomorans developed their dominions, and they had rulers that started to split up the area. The western part of the area I showed earlier developed into the Duchy of Pomerania, and the eastern part, the lighter shade, developed into the Duchy of Pomerania. Names to keep in mind, and as you saw earlier, later on, some of this Pomerania area was incorporated into Pomerania as well. This is around the second half of the 12th century, by which time the Slavic population was more and more Germanized already by attracting settlers from Germany, by the rulers marrying into German families. So eventually this became a true German area, population-wise. At the end of the 13th century, you see changes have already occurred. The darker shaded area was again the Duchy of Pomerania, both east and west of the river Oder. And here we have the Principality of Rügen, not just on the island, but also on the mainland. And they had a dependency that belonged to them here in the land of Schlave. Pomerania expanded, and as I said, some of Pomerania was incorporated. But on the other hand, the Duchy of Pomerania was split in multiple parts over the centuries for inheritance reasons. If the Duke had multiple sons, he may have given parts of his land, part of his possessions to each of them. So it was split up. At this point here, we have Pommern-Wolgast, Pomerania, ruled from a town called Wolgast here on the island of Usedom, and Pomerania Stettin ruled from Stettin. And that changed multiple times, as I will show you on one of the subsequent slides. A slight oddity on this diagram here is the Hochstift of Kamin. It was Kamin was ruled by a bishop, but Kamin is located here, and this was his worldly possession. So a Hochstift is the land ruled by a bishop as a prince rather than his diocese, just out of interest to distinguish the two. So, slightly later in the 16th century, the boundaries have changed, but it's basically still the same area, just split up in different ways. And one thing to observe is this gap here, the indentation, which didn't belong to Pomerania at this point in time, because it was part of Brandenburg. Here I have a different representation of what happened during the 500 years that the House of Griffin of the Pomeranian dukes ruled the area. And you can see in this representation that there were multiple splits into different portions at different times. The House of Griffin was founded by Wartislav I in the year 1121. And there were 6 major partitions of the area of Pomerania over the years, and multiple sub-partitions in between. In the end, under Bogislav XII, the whole of Pomerania was reunited again, but only to be annexed by Sweden during the 30-Year War. So we had numerous hereditary divisions and reverts as shown in this diagram, and more than 25 changes altogether in jurisdictions, with up to 5 entities coexisting at the same time. There was a Pomerania Bad, a Pomerania Wolgast, a Pomerania Stolp, a Pomerania Stargard, and a Pomerania Stettin existing in parallel under different members of the Griffin family. Bogislav XII died in 1637, and that was the end of the House of Griffin. And if you look at the link I've given here, that's where the diagram comes from. There's a lot more information, and there's a table of all the dukes of Pomerania from the House of Griffin. So you can get a good impression of the changes during those 500 years. This is not entirely relevant for our genealogy research, of course, because from those days there are hardly any records left, but I think it gives you a bit of background information about the times and the changes. At the end of the 30-Year War, there was a separation of Pomerania as part of the peace contracts. The light gray area was given to Brandenburg, and the Swedish crown received the western part of Pomerania in darker gray shade. So this was called Swedish Pomerania, and this was the further or eastern Pomerania. It remained like that until the Great Northern War that was fought between 1700 and 721 between the Swedish Empire and the Tsardom of Russia. They had big coalitions, but in the end, Sweden was defeated. And in the Peace of Neustadt, a treaty between Russia and Sweden, Sweden had to give up control over the southern half of Swedish Pomerania, and the island of Rügen and this little dark gray area here remained with Sweden for another for a couple of more years. And you see that again here more was incorporated into Pomerania towards the east. This is a slightly more detailed picture showing you the different areas. Prussian East Pomerania with the Kamin area here in a lighter shade. Prussian West Pomerania and Swedish Pomerania. The remaining Swedish parts of Pomerania were lost to Sweden after the Napoleonic Wars that also affected Pomerania. They lasted from 1803 to 1815. And a lot of changes happened, not just that Swedish Pomerania was given up to Prussia. There was a whole swapping around, and I should have a diagram, yes. It started with the Duchy of Saxe-Lauenburg, which is actually in Schleswig-Holstein, being given to Hanover as part of the Congress of Vienna Treaty. Then Hanover gave Saxe-Lauenburg to Prussia in return for East Frisia, which is close to the Netherlands, nothing to do with Pomerania. That was in May 1815. And only a week later, Prussia gave Saxe-Lauenburg plus a lot of thalers of money to Denmark in return for Swedish Pomerania. So that's how Swedish Pomerania became Prussian again, by this circle of swaps and barters. And that's what Pomerania looked like after the Napoleonic Wars. This missing bit here has also been incorporated, and it's now all in one, under one common rule as part of Prussia. It was divided into three districts. The former Swedish part became the district of the government district of Stralsund. Stralsund here in the center. The other part of Western Pomerania plus parts of Eastern Pomerania became the government district of Stettin. Stettin is roughly here. And the remainder was the government district of Pöslin, located somewhere here. This division lasted until 1932, at which time the district of Stralsund was merged with the district of Stettin, and the boundary was moved slightly further to the east. And then in 1938, another third district was added, the government district Grenzmarkt, Posen, West Prussia. And other than this addition here, the remaining areas had been German for several hundred years, from the 1200s, 1300s. This area was partially Polish in between World War I and World War II. So here the nationality of the inhabitants was less clear and less stable than in the other parts of Pomerania, which will play a role later. With a little more detail of the individual counties, this was the separation, Tschechien, Köslin, and Posen-Westpreußen as the government districts. So this is the map that you should have in mind when looking for the place where your relatives came from, because these districts, these counties had the archives, had the registrar's offices, and that's what you need to be looking for. After the end of World War II, everything to the east of the River Oder, plus a little bit here, the island of Wolin, and parts of this area became Polish, and the rest was merged together with Mecklenburg into the province of the German Democratic Republic called Mecklenburg. The Pomeranian bits are slightly darker here in the east, but they were not given a distinguished entity. That only happened after the wall came down. The Bundesland today is called Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and Vorpommern is a distinguished entity within that Bundesland. The name Pomerania today is rather misleading depending on where you're coming from. There are four administrative units that carry the name Pomerania as part of their name. One is the Bundesland Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, or Western Pomerania, and in Poland there are three districts, government districts, in Polish voivodeship: Western Pomerania, Pomerania, and Kujawian Pomerania. So you need to, again, understand who you're talking to and what you're looking at, what is meant by Pomerania. And I have found a nice table giving you all the different combinations and separations of regions in the different terminologies. The German, the Polish, and the Kashubian terminology for the different parts. And here, for example, you have the area of Kolobretz or Kolberg. In German, it is called Eastern Pomerania, part of Eastern Pomerania, and Polish terminology is part of Western Pomerania, which can be quite confusing. That was the quick tour through the administration over the 1,000 years, but I also want to give you a little more background information. One is the traces of Swedish influences in Pomerania. When the Swedes took control, they wanted to obtain a fair basis for taxation in a land that they didn't understand, that they didn't know. So the King Charles XI started attempts to survey the land and to document those surveys. Between 1692 and 1709, surveyors went through and did a fantastic job at mapping and documenting the Western Pomeranian areas. This resulted in over 1,700 maps. I'll show you examples in a moment, and 77 volumes of descriptions of the land and its inhabitants. In particular, names of owners and inhabitants were documented as well, which is quite relevant for our genealogical research and is one of the earliest systematic documentations in Vorpommern or Western Pomerania. These maps and all the documents have been archived and are available, and most of them are actually available online for free. This is the internet page where you can find the maps and the person database. So you can, I don't think it can be switched to English, but with a Google Translator, you should be able to utilize this as well. And you can see the maps are quite detailed and quite precise for a small area each. There are some more links to information about this survey called Schwedische Landesaufnahme in German. So give it a try and have a look. The Historical Commission for Pomerania, a collection of historians, has actually authored almost a dozen big books about individual areas where they have evaluated the material from the Swedish land survey and pulled them together into a comprehensive handbook. That was Western Pomerania, but the same exercise was also carried out for Eastern Pomerania, to the east of the river Oder, by the Prussian King Frederick William I. When he came to power 1713, he wanted to have such a unified and fair basis for taxation as well. And between 1717 and 1719, a similar exercise was carried out as the Swedes did around the same time. In this exercise by the Prussians, unfortunately, we didn't get these precise maps that I showed you earlier, but we get a classification of the land and its inhabitants, how much land each individual farmer had, and what kind of quality the land had, so how high the tax could be. And again, it contained the names of the noble landowners, the peasants, the coopers, the stewards, and the land dwellers. They had to answer a systematic template, a questionnaire of questions, and that has been documented, has been archived, and is available. Actually, the Pommerscher Greif has done a systematic digest of all these informations, the Hufen classification, as it's called, and we have a database on our homepage that I will show you after the slides, where you can search for the names in the various villages and counties as a basis for your research to find your family name, and then go look deeper what they may have been up to in the place that they lived in. So this is a good early basis for family research. Swedish on the west of the river Oder and Prussian on the right, on the east. Among the questions that were submitted in advance, there was one about why people might have left Pomerania, especially in the middle of the 19th century. Clearly, the earliest major emigration wave was by old Lutherans from all over Pomerania, because they felt disadvantaged. The state was putting pressure on them to join the church, the state church, and they didn't want to do that. So whole villages or whole parishes left together with their priest or pastor to North America and southern Brazil for religious reasons. And later, socioeconomic pressure motivated others also to emigrate in large numbers. The highest concentrations of Pomeranian settlers were in the state of Wisconsin, which we can testify tonight by the list of participants that are from Wisconsin or have relatives in Wisconsin. About 1 in 4 inhabitants in Wisconsin has ancestors in Pomerania. And the other center is in the Brazilian state of Santa Catarina, South Brazil, where the Low German dialect is still spoken today in the town of Pomerode near Blumenau. Okay, that was the main part of the presentation, but I think I have one more. The effects of World War II. I prepared also 2 or 3 slides to one of the questions that was submitted. 1.8 million inhabitants of the province of Pomerania were affected by the flight and expulsion after 1945. The number of victims of war and violence was almost 500,000, and included in that number is the 100,000 fallen members of the Wehrmacht. This is more for the handout, but basically there was a misperception maybe in the question or in the general discussion whether Pomerania was given back to Poland after the World War II, or what was the justification for doing that. And as I try to point out in the presentation, Pomerania was never Polish, at least the 2 northern provinces, slightly different in the area that was only added 1938. So it couldn't be given back because it was never Polish. The reason behind it was that basically Poland, after the Second World War, was moved towards the west, was displaced towards the west. And I have a diagram showing this quite nicely. A lot of legal disclaimers. This is the diagram. And if you see here, this is Poland before the war, here. And after the war, Poland lost all this bit to Russia and was compensated by this part and this part from Germany. And the people that lived here, the Germans that lived here, made up almost 100% of the population, 99.0% in Pomerania. So there was not even a Polish minority in that region, but they were all pushed out. If they hadn't fled already in 45, they were expelled in 1946, and the area was repopulated by Poles and other nationalities that had been living in this area, which was given to Russia and was populated by Russians. So that's the background of the movements and displacements after the Second World War. I hope this answers the question that was posed in advance. That's what I have for a start, and now you're welcome to ask questions.
So thank you, Klaus, for this presentation.